Hello and welcome along to this, our 15th episode of the fastest growing show in DePIN. I'm your host, Neil, from the CMO of Havelo, and I will bring some guests to the stage in just a second. Before that, I was hoping to do a little bit of housekeeping, a few things that you may not be aware of that I just want to update our community about. My video's gone blurry again. Thank you, StreamYard. First off, in case you're unaware, we're still doing the 88% APY on our staking. We crossed the threshold, crossed a new milestone of 250 million. Havelo staked recently, but that 88% rate, the little birds are telling me is going to be dropping soon. So you've got some HVLO and you want to take advantage of that 88%. I think that window is probably closing. That's what I'm hearing anyway. Couple other quick things. We have our buyback and burn program for HVLO is going to be kicking off pretty soon. We're taking part of the revenue that Havelo will be making from our DePIN mining and using that to burn HVLO. So that's coming soon as well. There'll be an announcement, I would say, with a lot more detail in the next week. And finally, we have released details of Airdrop 2. If you don't know what those are yet. So we're doing a 50 million HVLO airdrop sometime in August. If you come to our community on Discord, you will be able to find out all about the details of that. So with all that said, let's crack on with the show. Today joining me is Bucks from Autonomy, Antonio from Swarm. Hey Bucks, hey Antonio, and crowd favorite Justin from Havelo. Welcome along, you guys. I'm just going to unmute you all. Actually, Bucks, I think yours is muted by yourself. So welcome along, everybody. I'd like to start off with if we just go around the table, and if you would like to just introduce yourself, Bucks, and tell us what you're working on, what your backstory is, and then Antonio, and then Justin, if you want to go after that.
Yeah. Hi guys. So false advertising to start. It says I'm the CEO of Autonomy. Autonomy doesn't have a CEO because no central entity owns it, which is quite nice. So I'm the CEO of a company called MadeSafe, which is possibly the world's oldest startup at 19 years. Finally put the network live earlier this year, and that network is Autonomy. And I'm sure we'll dive into quite how special that is through our little coffee chat. Although I have forgotten my coffee, which isn't ideal for a coffee chat.
Almost unforgivable. Almost.
So yeah, Antonio.
Yeah, I've reached peak caffeination, so more caffeine for me is just about idea.
Me too. I'm onto water now.
HDO time. Yeah. Have you been, just before we move on to Antonio, just tell us a little bit about Autonomy's the network. How long has that been in the making? Just briefly.
Yeah, so Autonomy, it grew up really last year. So it was 18 last year, and then we went live this year. It's been a tumultuous and challenging journey for the team. I'm relatively new to the MadeSafe team, taking it that final sort of few yards over the finish line. It's one of those things, the founder of Autonomy is a chap called David Irvin. And the quickest way I would explain it is that, Tim Berners-Lee gave us all access to the web, with TCP and all the technologies that he put in front of us so we could actually interact with what was quite a clever technology from DARPA, it has to be said. David Irvin is going to free us from it. So his aim is to really break us out of this bizarre type matrix that we've created that we only thought existed in movies. And again, I'm sure we'll dive into that. So the powers that be don't want networks like this to exist. And I think it goes, a lot of people ask me, who are you competing with and how does it work? And, to answer who we're competing with, we're not really, we're really in the base layer of the internet of what it should have been and could have been if everybody owned it rather than having these sort of choke points. And I came on board really because I've been in Web3 for a little while, a few years, which is a lifetime in this space of ours. and just really disenfranchised and demoralized by the perception of what Web3 could be versus the reality of it. And you're only as decentralized as your least decentralized part. And it transpires that normally when there's cash involved or there's an AWS outage, you very quickly see that it's not as decentralized as advertised. So I entered the MaySafe team with a high amount of skepticism, and then within a few months realized that these guys are the real deal, and the community is one of the most technically proficient and based communities I've ever come across. So that's why they managed to reel me in, and I've stayed to play for a little while. So it'd be nice if we stopped calling it Web3 and it's just the internet as it should have been. And I don't think, and David doesn't believe, that we've ever actually had the internet as it was intended to be. We've got some sort of Frankenstein's child version of it that is actually just using us for product and cash purposes, not really for what it was intended to be. So that was you'll get used to this. Yeah, that was a really long answer to a really short question, but there you go. You didn't get my childhood story, so that's a bonus.
There's a lot to unpack there for sure. We'll come back. I definitely want to double click on a few things. Antonio, what's your backstory and what's Swarm all about?
All right, thank you. Thanks for having me. Thanks, thank you, Ivalo. So I work at Swarm. I'm ecosystem at Swarm, and let me be a bit visionary on the thing. Well, I think the main idea of Swarm is to become the foundational layer of the sovereign Web3. It was created essentially. I'm using the term Web3 because this is where we come from. The three, one of the three, it's Swarm. One of these the numbers in that number, because it was created at the Ethereum Foundation with a very strong principles. It's a very principled tech, and it enables what it's so-called a world computer. This place, this virtual place where users truly own their data, their identity, and essentially their digital lives. We are also, we power full stack. That is the whole. We are not delivering or not enabling applications that go halfway the decentralization stack. We deliver completely full stack applications, truly unstoppable, that enables new forms of communication, and all without relying on central servers, because that's what we do. We serve permissionless apps and publishing, essentially a digital world that no one can take away. And coming back about the digital surveillance that Bax was mentioning, because it kind of triggered me a little bit. I was looking in the dark web, how much does it cost to buy personal data for 10,000 people? And the actual cost of that, it's $6. It's ridiculous. So this is why we need to empower these applications, this infrastructure, so that we can save ourselves and the future digital life from this panopticon that we are living in.
Yeah, that's terrifying. I'm not surprised actually, but it is terrifying to hear that it's only $6. Yeah, that the Web2 world of data being essentially a currency. I definitely want to double click into that a little bit more. Because there's just a lot to unpack there, I think. But first, Justin, do you want to give us a little oversight of your backstory and Havelo?
Sure. I'll start by saying Bucks has given me the confidence to say that I'm not a coffee drinker. So Bucks doesn't have coffee. I don't drink coffee. So
where did we go wrong with this show?
I'm always surprised that I get invited on the show.
I'm surprised as well. I mean, that's a serious topic, Krishna.
Today I'm having hemp granola. That's my coffee here, and then my warm drink of choice when Dom, co-founder of Havelo, came to Toronto for Consensus. He came to drop off a Dutch treat, a stroop, and in return I gave him a pot of turmeric latte. So that's my drink of choice. So if the audience post requests for the recipe, they can have it by the end of the show as a reward for talking about DePIN for an hour.
I'm sure we'll have a long queue of people looking for that.
Dom did ask for it after tasting it, so that was good. I talk funny because I was born in Cape Town, grew up in Sydney, and that's the accent, but now I'm living in Toronto. Dom brought me into the Web3 world originally through his Banksa project, and then we've been working together ever since as Aussie expats, and really excited about Hivelo's ability to contribute to the world of UBI, Universal Basic Income, and leveraging off the DePIN protocols that do an amazing work building amazing things. And the gap we saw was making that accessible to everyone on the planet, whether it's a villager in Kenya, as long as they've got a laptop or a desktop. So that's what's excited me as a originally South African-born individual.
Yeah, definitely something that was interesting for me as well when I came across Havelo at first, was the capacity there to do real good in the world. So I think that's a driving force. I think that's a fairly common theme amongst our team. Thanks, really, Justin. Just to go back to books, about something you said about the Matrix and how we're all kind of living in this Matrix. It reminded me of something that I heard. I think it was Elon Musk said something about like how that we're basically like our phones are essentially an extension of our body already. Like we're so integrated with them and the internet through them, social media, etc. That, yeah, is that kind of along the same lines as what you mean when you talk about us all living in a matrix, where essentially the internet that we interact with is powered by algorithms. It's showing us things, making us feel things. It's like essentially we're the product. It's selling all of our data. We don't have any agency really, or I suppose very little agency, although I think probably slightly more than we used to have. Is that what you mean, or do you want to, or have I got that completely wrong? And if I do, by all means.
No, I love a loaded question like that, because I'm not going to disagree with what you just said. Yes, it is what I mean. I think when one of your guys popped into our Discord and sort of said about this show and what it was all about, and one of the things was it's an introduction to decentralized, infrastructure, physical infrastructure. And so if I was going to deconstruct it a little bit for people that are, don't like maybe buzzword bingo, and Web3 feels like such a niche anyway, and then it's a niche of a niche of a niche, and we all talk about tokens and coins, and then we talk about our aspirations and this wonderful utopia that could be sitting on the other side of if we just stake this, and if we just buy that, and if we just interact with this post, or retweet this message, or whatever it is. But if you think of this massive part of the world, so if you go back to all the really essential things of the world, so from water, which 20% of that's owned by big corporations, and then you go to land, well, that's 30% of that's owned by big corporations up to, and then you go to energy and you're up to 40%, and then you go to food and you're up to 70% of that's corporatized, and then you go to the internet. And the internet, just like those other things, is now, for all the reasons you just said, Neil, one of the essential resources. It's our knowledge base, it's most of our payment mechanisms, thanks to contactless, it's our health data. It's you think what would happen if there was an internet outage and the problem that would ensue across the world almost instantaneously. And I think if you think of it like a layer cake, so the bottom base layer, your internet service providers, your exchange points, and that's locked down. That's your fiber optic cable, that's all your hardware, that's all your commodity stuff. And then on top of that, you have your sort of your back end, I suppose, cloud providers, and that's your AWS and your Google and your Azure, and they, between the three of just those guys, That's 70% of it. And then the 30% is like your Oracles and your IBMs, right? So they're like your back end infrastructure guys, the bit that, not infrastructure, but like the back end of the internet that you don't see. And then on top of that, the next layer is your content delivery networks. And these are the guys that are monitoring, they're allowing you to access data through, caching, so that you're getting performance on the internet. And, somewhere in the region of 60 to 70% of the videos you interact with come across a CDN, a content delivery network. But your content delivery network doesn't just do that. Your content delivery network providers, they are tracking your traffic. They're tracking data, and they can block things and they can promote things. So, and then you have on top of that, all of those lovely cloud services. And when you think of like the layer cake of the internet and how constricted that it actually is, and I mentioned Tim Berners-Lee at the beginning, and, TCP and IP in its nature was meant to be decentralized. And it kind of worked, because in a way there isn't one owner of the internet, but there are only a handful of owners of the internet rather than just one, because between those 4 layers I talked about, they are the choke points, and you've got an enormous amount of volume created by really just 6 companies. And so if you think about it, and David used this sort of, he told this story about if aliens looked at our planet, this you should definitely have David on when he's a bit better, but aliens look at our planet, all these, he can talk in a completely, you have to get through the Scottish accent, but he'll chat in a way that my mouth just goes. But he was saying if aliens looked at the planet, they'd be like, oh, these guys are ingenious. They've created this global communication system where they can all talk to each other and share things with each other. And then they'd look a bit closer and they go, what are they doing? They're not all talking to each other. They're funneling all of their communications through a few corporate entities. And those entities are deciding what's shown, how it's shown, and then they're paying for the privilege of that as well. So when I talk about the matrix, I'm talking about the fact that we have literally, and for generations behind ours, we've literally been brought into this sort of digital world, which as we get embodied AI and as we have AI and algorithms and people talk about dead internet theory, it gets, I'm not trying to scaremonger people, because I don't think it's something to be scared of. I think it's something to acknowledge and then start addressing. And I don't believe we can start addressing the control, the constraints, and sort of the censorship that we've got by being too techie and too buzzwordy and too niche. I think what we need to do is talk about the applications and the wonderful things people can enjoy. And as we've got with the internet right now, most people on the internet don't know about TCP. They don't know about IP. They're not worrying about the net transversal problem. They're not talking about any of that. They're engaging with ChatGPT. They're on this new app. They're downloading this thing. And so we need to sort of, I think, technical conversations like this are important, but what's probably more important is the delivery on top of that stuff. And just to bring it back to autonomy and how, like, our role in that, we obviously can't really play at the infrastructure level when you're talking fiber optics, and if you're American, a router, modem router, if you're Brit, router. But what we need to do is we need to, if people are able to do better routers, we're the bit above that. So we're the storage infrastructure layer that you pay once to the network. It's a not-for-profit that's sort of got the guardianship over this. So it's not a money-making scheme at all. You pay the nodes and then your data is there. We can talk about how that all works, but it's encrypted, it's duplicated, it's fragmented. So you can't unpuzzle the puzzle unless you've got the data map and you've got the key to put those things together. And then your data, whether it's knowledge, whether it's something that's not that important, or whether it's something that's really important to you, your family, your business, whatever it is, just exists forever. Because if you have to pay for your data, it's not your data, because it means it's sitting behind a gate somewhere that you're having to pay to access it. That's like paying every time you open your filing cabinet to some person that owns the filing cabinet. That's weird. So that's the idea of autonomy, and how we break out of the internet starts with who owns the internet, who has access to the internet, and under what terms and conditions we can play. And one final thing with my longest answer in the world, maybe this is why I don't have coffee, because I'd never have time to sip it. But the last thing I would say is you can tell if somebody is genuinely offering you something that's permissionless and doesn't require you signing terms and conditions when there is no checkbox for terms and conditions, where there is literally no box to tick in order to use the service. There is no one you have to talk to. There is nobody you have to sort of pass the sniff test of. You can literally just access and build. And so from a builder's point of view on autonomy, that's exactly the deal. You can come and talk to the team. You never need to talk to the team, but we don't know who you are, where you are, what you are, because it doesn't matter, because it doesn't belong to anybody. Everybody has and should have access to the internet. So anyway, I'm going to get off my little soapbox now, and sort of, yeah.
Listen, that's great. That's great. I suppose the counter argument is, what happens if like autonomy goes away? Do you know what I mean?
It's the same thing. Bitcoin goes away though, right? So Bitcoin, even if you broke the internet completely, Bitcoin, even with mesh networks, would still exist. I think that's where autonomy is different. It is there are no miners in autonomy, because you can't. Again, David would talk about this really well, but blockchain's an amazing technology when you are talking finance, because it does have that centralized data infrastructure at the heart of it, the ledger-based technology. Autonomy doesn't have a central point of failure. It doesn't even have a central data repository because it doesn't need one. So the node network is self-healing. It will cast nodes out. The whole network's been designed looking at the natural world, because beyond money, which is obviously a human myth that we made up to do commerce and communicate with each other, nothing really of exponential success and scale, if you look at the natural world, has a central point of failure and based on perception rather than practicality. So the autonomy network is designed, we're building something, it's like planting a tree that's there to it'll outlive all of us, and it won't need human intervention. And that's why it's called autonomy, because autonomy as a word is a lovely word, right? It gives you power, it gives you authority, it gives you the ability to choose and do things for yourself. When you flip that to autonomous, people get a bit scared because it's happening without you, without your input. And so the idea of it is an autonomous network. It doesn't need, after the first 5 to 8 years, once it's really up and running, it won't need any single person or anything looking after it. As long as there is some form of internet and electricity, it will be fine. And if there isn't, we've probably got a much bigger problem on our hands, like a dinosaur ending event type problem. So that's the basis of it. And it can also exist you can run an autonomy node on a Raspberry Pi. So it doesn't need big, complicated devices. The idea is that you're using everyday devices because it needs to be accessible. So the moment you start buying big bits of computer hardware, and some people will do that, they'll do their own setups, but the idea being it's not enough to be decentralized, because decentralization could be between 5 big companies that are running tens of thousands of nodes. That's not decentralized. Decentralized and distributed need to go hand in hand. So it's the idea that we've already got more coverage than Amazon in terms of locality. And we can only tell that because nodes know where they are in relation to one another, even though we've got no idea where they are in the world, if that makes sense. So you can kind of get a generalist view over the world based on the spaces between nodes, but they don't have any concept of time and space because they don't need to. If autonomy fails, everything's kind of gone kaput, I think, is the answer to that.
End of days.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. Antonio, just to click on something you said, double click whether, about owning your own shit, basically your data,
Mm-hmm.
your identity, etc.
Why don't we
Maybe,
have it?
yeah,
Why don't
maybe it
we
would be
own it?
helpful to dive into that a little bit and just explain to people why that matters, because I feel like one of the biggest hurdles in today's society is that a lot of people just don't really understand why they should value the things that those of us who have, for want of a better way to describe it, been orange pilled, kind of do understand it. So maybe, given that you mentioned it before, it would be a good idea, and it seems to be kind of at the heart of what you're doing at Swarm. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that for people and
Sure,
help them understand what the world should look like.
sure. So, well, how this crypto hurdle started? It started with certain weird guys that we know have in mind, or we speak about them very much, but they were not that popular back there, which were called the cypherpunks. And these guys champion one thing, which is becoming, sadly, more and more common and broadly commented everywhere, which is privacy. Privacy matters because privacy is not secrecy. I want to highlight this differentiation, which is usually think, oh, I have nothing to share, I have nothing to hide. Sorry, so why should I protect it? Well, you wouldn't give them your Gmail password, and that's why privacy matters, because you have to have the power to disclose what you want to show the outer world and what you keep in your inside. It is very individual, it's very intrinsic. That is why it matters, and that is why it is being constantly targeted, and there's no freedom without privacy. You cannot criticize a government, you cannot criticize anything if you don't have the right to not be targeted right after you do this critique. So it matters for several levels of society. It's a basic human principle. And we used to have a beautiful internet back in the day, when it was the internet 1.0, when there was these bulletin boards and it looked very ugly, but colorful. It was fantastic. And the problem was, as usual, it was money. So the incentives are what broke the internet. When you had a little shiny page that started to get traffic, well, then you need to fund this traffic and you need to pay for that. And that's when the problem starts. How am I going to pay it? With ads. And that's what broke everything. And that's where we are. The ads broke the internet, and it allowed our data to be used as a commodity and to be targeted and put it everywhere. And that's the promise of crypto, of Web3, or the internet as it was promised, however you want to call it.
Antonio,
to change the set of incentives. Yes.
Antonio, you mentioned there as well, and I thought it's such an important point: privacy versus secrecy. And you mentioned about the fact you wouldn't just share your Gmail password, and I mentioned, the other day, like, I'm not doing anything nefarious in my living room. That doesn't mean I want everyone looking through my window while I'm sat in it. That's weird.
Exactly.
Like,
it's like, yeah.
Do you worry though that we're creating, with crypto particularly, inadvertently a roadmap for centralized digital currencies? Because to me, we're almost showing them the way to do this. And somebody I know lost their phone died, and they were saying, and they're in Europe currently, and they're saying, like, what a nightmare it is to just exist for a few hours from now without a phone, because everything's tap this, contactless that. You don't necessarily have a watch on, so you don't know the time. You just feel you're unplugged from the internet, and you notice it. And I worry a little bit that Web3, we're almost showing them how to innovate us into further compliance, when you've got like carbon footprint capture, like all of these things that you just said, like you couldn't talk out against your government. I'm in the UK. We're having big problems with that, like literally right now, because everything is being tracked. And if they then knew, and they could go into your bank account, or they can literally stop you leaving your house at some point. So do you think we're creating a blueprint for our own destruction? Basically, I know that's coffee, but these are the things that keep me up at night.
Yes, it is. Well, the internet, it's, I would say, we are tool makers. We are blacksmiths. We are creating tools that, I come from Spain, and you can use a knife to cut a delicious slice of Spanish ham, or you can stab people. It's the same knife. So it depends very much what you want to do with that tool. And we are not policemen. I am not a policeman. I am a technologist. What we do is we create new tools. These tools can be terrifying, but it can solve at the same time fantastic problems. And I think that it is true that the governments, or certain, let's put it this way, certain governments, certain authorities long for more control and the power that this technology enables. But at the same time, this technology enables and empowers the individual greatly. That's why we talk all the time about ownership, sovereignty, all these words that look very weird to the average Joe, but matters a lot, because this is what it's about. It's not, when they ask me, is it crypto a left-wing or right-wing technology? It's not. It's in the middle. It's what you want to do with it. It's how you want to employ this technology. And this is why solutions like yours or like mine, or we need to create and to arrive to this full stack Web3 where no application can be taken down. Unfortunately, we are not yet there. That was the promise. I don't know. I mean, I've been here for a while. I started the Ethereum community in Madrid, where I come from. Nobody cared about that in 2015. Time has changed, but that was the promise over there. We need to create decentralized applications that no one can stop. And the DAO, I don't know if you all remember the DAO. What was with that idea? The content was hacked. It was a complete mess, but it was never decentralized. Even the images that we use right now are hosted. The NFTs are hosting things in AWS. It is not unstoppable, and we need to arrive there in order to protect ourselves and protect the individuals against this power, decentralized power that is raising and is using the same tools we are creating against the individuals.
I get what I totally get what you're saying, and we've had examples, haven't we, where, you know, even the Telegram founder, you cannot be responsible in the same way a mayor can't be responsible for what every individual does in their city, or a car owner can't be responsible for a drunk driver, or whatever it is. I do totally respect that. I think the flip side of it is that even with Bitcoin, once something, because you said it, like at the beginning of the internet, money gets involved. And so now you look at the biggest holders of Bitcoin, and you look at the corporate interests, and you look at crypto getting now excited about ETFs. And you're like, oh, there's going to be an ETF, and the big boys are coming in. And you're like, hang on a minute. Wasn't it that the big boys weren't meant to come in? Wasn't that what we were fighting about? And now we're meant to be excited that governments are creating Bitcoin reserves and all of these things. So I obviously don't know the answer, but it's funny with autonomy, there is this backlash of, you're going to create the dark web. You're going to, and I loved your point about you can use a knife to cut bread, or you can use it to do something, you know, evil. And the choice is largely with the individual that's got it. And you would hope that more individuals do good than do bad. But if I had a choice, if I'm being really honest, between absolute control, which is what people tend to go to for safety, right? I would rather have a safe street, so I'm happy to have a digital ID. I would rather know that my income was protected, so I don't want innovation. I would rather everybody get the COVID jab because I don't want the fear of catching COVID. We all know how that turned out. The other extreme of that, of course, is chaos. Somebody can walk into your house and say, this is my house now. Somebody can, you know, like without government, without control, you end up with lawlessness, and that can go extreme. And so what's interesting is we're having to figure out where that middle ground is in real time. And I don't think anybody has quite, and I don't think any individual would quite understand where that line is. But David and I fundamentally disagree about one thing, and I'd love to hear your guys' take on this, which is the role of having companies. So David doesn't believe that in the future there will be any companies. He doesn't believe there'll be any applications. He doesn't believe there'll be money in the far, far future. But I've sort of said to him, but companies employ circa 80% of the workforce. You know, there are some people that work independently and things, of course. but having a company in that central kind of construct allows people to contribute, and by contributing they then are able to extract value. If AI and robotics and peer-to-peer networks, whatever it is, end up by, you don't need the middlemen, you don't need the structures, everything is now automated, and you don't need companies that become inconsequential, how does a human being contribute? Where does any kind of structure and wealth come from? And so are you anti, I guess what I'm asking is, I'm pro decentralization, but I'm also still pro free market and companies. And some people on the extreme are not. So I'd love to hear, like, you guys as well, like Hivleo. I can't even say it. Hivleo.
I'll jump in. I'm interested in Antonio's answer to that, but if I could maybe help refine the question, because
Hivleo. I've said it now. There you go.
Yes, well done.
Well done. Gold star.
And so, Bucks, are you, because you can have a not-for-profit, like a club or a charity. So are you saying, David, we're not going to have not-for-profits, clubs and charities? And then you obviously have Web3, where the token itself is a not-for-profit, but the founder has got free tokens to start the project off, and then everyone's interest is aligned to increase the price of the token, and that's how they pay their bills. So one has to, I guess, clarify what his vision is. One can certainly say that in that spectrum of not-for-profit, for-profit company, and token, that companies will centralized profit creators and takers, that there might be a significantly reduced percentage of the universe in those, and increased in the clubs and not-for-profits, and increase in tokens for the reasons we discussed this morning, whereby the for-profit structure immediately creates an us and them mentality. So you've got the shareholders, you've got management and employees, and then the environment and the community stakeholders. And so that's why those other structures are very useful to create better alignment, better and government support, more likely to help a charity than it is to help a company.
Where does the government get money from, though? Right. So this is my point.
Yeah,
if you're, oh, go on. Sorry, Neil.
Sorry, I just think if we're looking that far into the future, because like we're talking about like post the singularity, post robots being commonplace, post AI basically removing the need for most people to work. I just don't think we can. Maybe there's somebody out there who has a great imagination and technical foresight, like, I don't know, like a Gene Roddenberry of 2025, who can just imagine what the future will be, and then we as a species go off and create it. But I just don't see how, like, because I've spent a fair amount of time trying to think forward into the future about, what's it all going to look like? Is there going to be a need for a CMO in 5 years, or do I need to start thinking about what my career looks like? Those kinds of questions. I just don't think we know. I don't think anybody knows.
Money's value, though, right? So I think that there's two takes on this for me. So in Web3, it's aligned incentives. If your token has utility, either because it's something somebody else wants, so that's going to have future value to you, or it's giving you access to something you want, that makes a lot of sense. And so my point to David is that I spend a fortune on my various internet digital subscriptions every month, whether it's your cloud hosting, whether it's your entertainment packages, whether it's your phone bill, like whatever the hell it is. If I didn't need to be paid in fiat to then pay that in fiat, and I was paid in a token that then paid for all of those things, no problem. I don't need to be the middleman in my own life. That value can go from one service direct to another service, and I'm happy that those things exist together. So I think that's where Web3 massively makes sense. And I think when you're a private company, and again, people that will come and build the autonomy network, they can set up whatever commercial arrangement and model that they want. They can accept tokens, they can accept fiat payments, they can do have it open source, they don't have to, they can charge for it, they don't have to. That's down to the individual. And for me, money is about not being restricted. It's about being able to, and that's why you have elites in the world that want to control or do control all of this, going back to our DePIN conversation, all of this infrastructure, because that's where the value is. And the rest of us have to play like this technical serfdom role within their infrastructure. If DePIN can break us out of that, so we're able to create our own value and make our own choices, we then have a chance to genuinely be entrepreneurial again. Because at the moment, you can be entrepreneurial, but only within the categories that they allow you to be entrepreneurial in, because of the technology restrictions that we're contained within, without even really realizing it. We just sort of accept it, So that's where David and I completely disagree.
Yeah, I'll definitely he's invited to the show anytime he has the time to be here, because I think these kinds of discussions are fantastic. I'm just kind of cognizant of the time. We've about 14 minutes left before the hour is up, and I'd like to ask some questions from the audience, if that's all right with you guys. Maybe we can try and make them quick fire, because there's actually a good few here. So I'll just start going through them, and then anybody wants to contribute an answer, crack on, or I'll ask the person I think is most suited to answer it. The first one is, how can DePIN help people in the third world countries get past tech barriers so everyone can use it?
I'll jump in there. That seems to have picked up on an earlier comment. So this is the DNA of Hivelo, leveraging off the great work that the DePIN protocols have done, and making it accessible by effectively automating node running. And so that's the first step, is automating the node running, so that you just download Hivelo, and Hivelo will run whatever DePIN will deliver you the most return on your hardware. And we've started off with laptops and desktops. So that's the first step. From a Hivelo point of view, there's certainly enough desktops and laptops for us to build a very big company. But as I said, it started off with a vision as well, and I love thinking about what's 10 phases ahead, and what does the Kenyan villager need? They need electricity. They need the Wi-Fi. This is to run DePIN, by the way. Electricity, Wi-Fi, and a computer. And so we're always going to be thinking philanthropically about how we can get to the edge. From funding a computer, I think that up until now, there's certainly been initiatives of World Bank and the like, and Dell, to get e-waste from the West to developing countries. And by having passive income that easy, it then becomes a fishing rod rather than a fish. So the whole ROI from a societal impact completely changes, rather than saying, all right, we're going to ship a bunch of Dell laptops, and then they're going to have to get schooled on how to, work with Excel and Word and apply for jobs and all these things. So it's a very long payback period. Or we're going to ship a laptop. You don't have to really know anything about it other than download an app, plug it in, connect to Wi-Fi, and now you're actually paying the rent with your DePIN revenue. So that's really exciting to me. And then if World Bank doesn't deliver for anyone that doesn't get the free hardware, I'm also very excited by the microfinance organizations. So in the Web 2 world, you've got Opportunity International. In the Web 3 world, you've got a Cardano project called Credit Coin, and we're really excited. Again, it's 10 phases away for us, but we're really excited to do that, because the paybacks for anyone getting a laptop running DePIN is going to be so short, and with negligible credit risk. So those are some of the ideas that we get excited about when we get to look into a crystal ball, but it's certainly some time away.
Thanks, Justin. I think this one would be good for you, Antonio, because you were talking about building things that are unstoppable because they're permissionless, censorship resistant, etc. What happens if somebody creates the question that I see in here is sort of, what happens if someone creates a monster, basically? I don't know what that looks like. I'm not going to pretend to be imaginative enough to be able to suggest it. But what if we as a society need to take something down to prevent bad actors, etc.? So I suppose the question is, how can advancements in DePIN technology reshape societal norms and behaviors around trust and ownership?
Okay, so this is a lot to unpack here. I will try to make it a brief. So when you're thinking about a monster, I would say imagine the Terminator scenario, right? Skynet that controls everything, that has DePIN are their hands, or its hands, how it touches the world. That's what DePIN would do. DePIN bridges the physical world to the virtual world. And this monster, this Skynet that controls everything, well, I would say that we need to be careful. And there are several voices raising these concerns right now. And I like a best practice or a rule of thumb that I've heard about this AI monster that we might particularly create virtually, which boils down to this quote from J.K. Rowling that says, "I never trust anything that can think for itself. You can see where it keeps its brain." That is one of the core values of this industry, which is transparency. So if we are able to see what these things are doing with this, we can act upon it before it is too late. We can, if the society decides that it's a bad thing, because the ultimate goal of crypto is to empower individuals and the way that they gather. So if the society decides to go against it, and it's transparent, we will have time to act. We can do stuff on it. But of course, it is a technology. So technology can be terrifying sometimes, and it can solve at the same time, as Justin was mentioning before, it can solve very, very serious and long-term problems. It's the two sides of the same coin.
Okay, thank you. Very good. Next, the DePIN projects proliferate across connectivity, mapping, weather, positioning, and compute. The end of that question's gone missing. Oh, hang on. What frameworks would enable seamless cross-protocol data exchange and unified token incentives? I mean, I guess that's down to each individual DePIN project. Does anybody want to take that?
I can talk a little bit about, I think the standardization is important, community standards for things like that, because it's really important we don't have walled gardens in DePIN. Everybody's pretty happy with that. And I think partnerships and collaborations are essential. I think that also comes back to an individual owning their own data so that they can then choose where and how that state is used, access control, giving it, withdrawing it, and able then, rather than you having to, like all of the companies doing the integration, the individual themselves can then choose to almost be the hub of that information. I think that's where it gets really exciting once we break down these walled gardens. What the actual end user experience will be completely different. And one of the, the art of war, right? You don't fight the big giants on their own turf. None of us are big enough, strong enough, or rich enough to do that. You have to go where they aren't. And I think that's where, we talk about data sovereignty. You guys mentioned it as well. And we talk about, use cases that are in, you know, rural locations or farther flung locations, or people that don't have the resources. And yet, if you had this internet that was genuinely open, where you as the user of that internet were in control of where your data went, and the community standards meant that you could have freedom and flexibility around that, I think that's where we get the wonderful word back of interoperable. And it's something that, you know, Web3 talks about quite a lot, interoperability. You know, you can take this asset from a game and you can put it in another game, or take this song and then put it in this movie, or whatever it was. But you're still dealing with the traditional structures of who owns the IP for that? Where does that really belong? Are you going to get sued for that? So we can work on an infrastructure level at designing it so that things can be interoperable. But I think there's an awful lot of work that still needs to be done and defined from a content and experience point of view on the top, because being able to do it and being allowed to do it based on content ownership are two completely different things. And that's when you get into the IP and ownership debate. And us as individuals as well, we can make the big companies the evil guys in all of this and say it's not fair and stomp our feet. But ultimately, if you'd created something and somebody's run off with it, you wouldn't be very happy either. So I think, again, I'm not sure the answer to that, but from a decentralization point of view, I think, you know, it's one of the, along with autonomy and independence and accessibility, I think interoperability is another sort of core tenet of what makes something truly decentralized in the first place.
Right, and I will say, I think in DePIN, there's a lot of collaboration. It definitely feels like more of a collaboration over competition type of space.
Totally.
But it is human nature to compete for whatever reason. And like, if you look at the L1 space, it seems like that's a very competitive landscape where there's a feeling of you know, market share, and you know, this is going to be the next Ethereum killer, or this is going to be the next whatever killer. Like, you know, the world doesn't need both, or you know, yeah, I don't know. I guess it's going to be a tough one while that still exists, I think, as at a more macro blockchain level. But yeah, interoperability. I wonder, will we ever see like a standardization of things at the level of, you know, I don't know, some of the other standards like HTTP, to use the one that you brought up before, Books. But there are other standards that everybody just kind of goes, okay, this is what we should adopt.
With bindings, so you've got, you know, you've got the protocol level, but then if your technology stack that you are working with C and C# and C++, and you're able to do Java, and you're able, so if you're building and you've got bindings and languages and support docs and other things that builders, no matter what language they're coding in, they can come and build and play and pull your stuff in. I think you've kind of got to be open for business. And at that point, the best products win. And we're at the infrastructure level. So that's really dependent on who wants to come and build and create with you and what they end up creating, because they're going to be the ones that are famous and successful. It's not going to be the lowly networks and protocols that they're built on. Yes, if you're a token holder and you're attached to that network, of course you will benefit because of the proliferation of that network, the utility of that network, the desirability and exposure and engagement levels of that network will all increase. So you're on the ground floor, and that's really good for you. But the normal everyday internet user isn't going to be aware of that, and that's okay. So I think it is that making sure you've got the right standards, tools, resources, and kits available for folks to be able to create with.
Yeah, to build the ecosystem. Let's see. I suppose this one's for you, Justin. What's Havelo's unique value proposition in the rapidly growing decentralized DePIN space, and how do we aim to achieve widespread adoption? Maybe try and keep it short, though.
Yeah, we've covered most of this. It really is the ability to seamlessly automate the node. So within minutes, be earning passive income. That's our DNA. That's our obsession. And the widespread adoption. Well, really, and this is the bizarre thing with HVLO, our token, our FDV is sub $10 million. So there's a big disconnect between where we are now and where we will be once we're out of beta and we've integrated enough DePINs that will cover your electricity and your time to even think about it. There's no ongoing time needed, but just time to keep it on. So until we get to that magic figure, whether it's $5 or $10 a month of passive income, our FTV tells us that the market thinks that this is the holy grails. We're never going to find the holy grail. We know it's going to happen with amazing builders on this show and on the previous shows. This is the DePINs at the internet of the 90s. Not a lot of us were buying books online in the 90s, but we saw where Amazon went after that. And so we really just need to, I guess, help the audience understand that DePIN is just at the beginning. The passive income is going to grow tremendously. There's never a problem getting widespread adoption when you're delivering money for free. So as we've seen when we've done airdrops and the like, even if it wasn't sustainable through those subsidies, people just come out of the woodwork, things go viral, everyone tells their family and friends. So the user adoption is really all about that DePIN income. And so whenever I get the opportunity at conferences or on spaces, I tell DePINs to not worry about supply anymore. Ivelo's got the compute supply covered. Please build DePIN protocols that don't require a dedicated device. Another thing that we need to choke up supply chains with, and then force users to spend $300 to $700 for another box in their house. Please just use the desktops and laptops that are already the infrastructure in everybody's home, and saves the environment, saves the supply chain, saves the users money, creates the widespread adoption. So that's the Havelo mantra.
Alrighty. Okay, well, we've crossed the threshold of the hour, so I just ask everybody for some final words, and if you want to let everybody know where they could go to check out your project, the website URL or the X handle, etc. Books, do you want to go first, and then Antonio, and then Justin?
Justin did the mic drop finish there. Yes,
yeah,
we have so many, I'm sat here, I'm on a computer, I've got a big screen behind me, I have 2 phones. I mean, just use the capacity we already have on our devices. These data centers are enormous. We need so many more of them, and we need so much electricity to power them. And in your pocket, in your home, in your all of these places, probably in a drawer somewhere there's an old iPad, we should be able to be using these devices to power our own future and not be dependent on everybody else. If you want to find autonomy brilliantly, totally unplanned, the X handle is @withautonomy, which I've actually got in the brackets, and you can find our Discord as well. If you go onto the X account, you'll see the Discord link, and I will try and get David to come on and chat with you guys, the founder, because he's much more interesting than me. You're going to have to battle with the Scottish accent. And Justin, before I go, before we wrap up and hand to Antonio, you must know Michael Casey. If you've been at
yes, of course,
he's an Aussie. Okay,
DAI,
so we're all in the same world. So yeah, lovely guy.
Love the decentralized AI society and doing amazing work. Yeah, me
too. So go and check them out as well.
Justin knows everybody.
I'll plug someone that's not even here.
Antonio?
Right. So I will finish with, when I give lectures eventually, and I teach in some business schools, and when they ask me, how do I get crypto? How do I get some tokens? I always say there are 3 ways to do it. Either you can buy it, you can mine it, but that requires some special hardware, or you can earn it. And this is where DePIN comes into place. You can earn cryptocurrency. You don't need a big fat machine to mine anything. You can bit by bit onboard everybody into this strange world with ups and downs and hiccups. And that's the value of DePIN, and this is why it matters so much. And that's the final thought. That's the promise, and this is how I think it will onboard everybody into crypto. If you want to check out more about us, about what Swarm and story, the website is ETH, like ETH, ethswarm.org. And that's it from me.
That's great. Thank you so much, Justin.
I'll let you handle
I'll
the
wrap
high
up.
level.
Alrighty. Well, in that case, huge thank you to all of our guests again this week. Bux, Antonio, and Justin, thank you so much for being here. And especially a massive thank you to all of you who have tuned in for this episode of the DePIN Coffee Hour. Havelo.com, if you want to get started with DePIN, you can mine Autonomy and Swarm and some others through Havelo. It's very simple. Just download it. It's as easy to install as Spotify, and you can Airbnb your PC. There's a few trademark infringements right there. Please don't sue us. But in any case, until next week, thank you so much to the guests and to you, our audience. See you next week.